Police Commission meeting. I would first like to acknowledge that the Seattle Community Police Commission acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the Coast Salish people, including the Muckleshoot, Suquamish, and Duwamish people, past and present. And with humility, we recognize how much we benefit from living on their land and water. The Seattle Community Police Commission honors and lifts up these tribes, and we hope that this acknowledgement will encourage authentic relationships with urban Native people and all Coast Salish tribes. And we first going to take attendance today. Start with myself, co-chair, Commissioner Joel Merkel, and I'll move on. Reverend Patricia Hunter.
Present.
Good morning.
Morning.
Reverend Harriet Walden.
Present.
Good morning. Commissioner Mary Ruffin.
Present.
Good morning. Commissioner Alina Santillan.
Present.
Good morning. Commissioner Erica Newman.
Present.
Good morning. Commissioner Tasha Johnson. Oh, I see Tasha. I'll try one more time. Good morning, Tasha. Are you present? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Good morning. Commissioner Lajaya Washington. Present. Commissioner Suzette Dickerson. Present. Commissioner Officer Mark Mullins.
Officer Mark Mullins is present.
Good morning. Commissioner Jeremy Wood.
Present.
Good morning. Commissioner Joseph Saya. Present. And Commissioner Asha Mohammed. Not present. Okay. First order of business is to approve today's agenda. It was emailed out yesterday by Interim Director Polly Ellis. Is there a motion to approve today's draft agenda?
I move that we approve the draft agenda, the agenda as distributed.
Thank you, Reverend Hunter. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mary. All in favor of approving today's draft agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. And the draft agenda for today is approved. In addition, the minutes from the last meeting was sent around. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
I will also move that we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
And I will second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting as distributed, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And the minutes are approved. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Interim Director Polly Ellis. The first agenda item on today's agenda is the discussion with youth. And I'm going to go ahead and let Dr. Polly Ellis set that discussion up and go ahead and lead that discussion.
Great, thank you very much. So I just want to remind everyone that the ordinance tasks us with having geographic representation as a body that's representative of the many and diverse communities in Seattle, including from each precinct of the city. And so what we've been doing since the beginning of the year and what we continue to do over the rest of the year is to welcome people from diverse communities to this meeting, to the bi-monthly meeting with the commissioners, to share their perspectives as different and diverse as they are and hear directly from a whole different set of communities about what their interests are in constitutional policing, public safety, anything about their concerns. As you remember from the meeting that we had on January 1st with small business owners and employees, this is an open discussion. We want to give voice to the people that are here to share their time, their experiences, and their input. And so what we are going to do is start with giving them the space to share whatever they would like. This is not presentations or anything like that, but to hear from them in their own words directly or as representatives of these communities directly. So this month is focused on youth. And when we were planning this meeting and thinking about who to invite, we wanted it to be broadly representative of what youth is. So youth in the community could be people as young as children. It's also people who are in high school or people that are not in school but are younger. It also, we have a number of very important colleges and universities here in Seattle, and it also should be, according to our ordinance, representative of the interests and thoughts and input of people from the colleges and universities, so a little bit older. So that's what we're going to start with first, is sort of opening up the floor to that discussion. So I believe who we have here right now is from Choose 180, is that correct? Mm-hmm. So Izzy Eves from Choose 180, as well as Leigh Howard, I'm sorry, who's also from Choose 180, and also one of our commissioners, Tasha Johnson, is from Choose 180. So I'm just going to open this up with a broad set of questions and give you the space to discuss whatever you'd like. So just to get us started, what are your thoughts and feelings on public safety in your community and or policing as the CPC is charged to oversee? And who is here? Who wants to go first? Because I believe we have Leigh, Izzy, and Tasha. So I don't know how we will.
I'm Leigh, and I'm from Choose 180. I'm 17 years old. I go to Garfield High School, and policing in my community, I would have to say, is there's a lot of police officers that worked at my schools, and like would talk to me about stuff that has happened in like cases that were going on that my friends are involved with, or and it would make me really uncomfortable, and I wouldn't really know what to do because number one, I was a kid.
Leigh, are you still speaking or you cut out?
No, I'm done.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
So I'm happy to add on as well. Hi, good morning. My name is Izzy. I'm the Youth and Young Adult Advocacy Program Coordinator at Choose 180. And I get the immense privilege of working with our local young people who are directly impacted by the criminal legal system. And so one of the things we see routinely is that young people who are impacted by our criminal legal system are overwhelmingly from socially, economically, and racially marginalized identities and communities. And they're routinely lacking access to resources that can support them in contributing to their communities fully. So at Choose 180, we tend to view young people as possibilities to be developed and invested in. It's something we talk about a lot instead of looking at them as problems to be dealt with. And what we know from our work is that making that shift in paradigm works. So our restorative programs keep our young people in community-based solutions instead of courtrooms. Over 90% of our participants do not re-engage with the criminal legal system within the year that we are working with them. And what we know is that criminalizing young people does nothing to ensure safety, accountability, or thriving communities. So instead, what we're seeing is that it's perpetuating discriminatory systems. It's pushing those who are most marginalized further from the resources that they need to positively engage with their communities. And it's allowing those with financial means an easy out. I work with young people all day long, every day. I have children of my own who are teenagers. And I was a criminalized teenager myself. these kids are so bright and talented and caring, and they desperately want opportunities to contribute to their communities in positive ways. And the bottom line is that criminalizing them does not do that. And their interactions with the Seattle Police Department are interactions, or at least the feedback we're getting from our young people is that these interactions are criminalizing and not supporting them in contributing in positive ways. So I will just leave you with the thought of our young people as the seeds of our future. If we really want to contribute to our society in healthy, thriving, meaningful ways, we can either choose to nourish our young people and help them to blossom, or we can hand them over to systems that are detrimentally limiting their growth. And I would just ask that we support solutions that view our young people as something to be invested in. And criminalization just does not have a history of doing that.
Commissioner Tasha Johnson, would you like to share your thoughts?
I'm not actually part of the panel. I do work at Choose 180, so I could say a few words, but I'm mostly in support of Izzy, and Izzy so beautifully summed that up. I think that the only thing that I would even add at that point was it was at the moment of, it sounded like just stopping short of talking about policing alternatives. And at Choose 180 right now, this is one of the things that we're looking into is being an organization that is able to provide policing alternatives to the initial phone calls. We're partnering right now with Burien PD to develop a co-responder model that, and I think it's no secret, the ultimate goal is that it would not be a co-responder model forever, but that it would be an absolute divergence from calling the police and then and calling the alternative options instead, and creating the pathway to developing what those options look like. I don't honestly don't remember your initial question, Callie. But as far as our engagement as an organization with policing and our young people with the police, we support our young people in all ways possible. And as Izzy said, the feedback that we've been getting is that the interactions have not been great. So we're doing everything that we can to work with the young people to move past those situations, and then also to work with the systems to view all young people, not just our program participants, but as Izzy said, but as possibilities and not problems that they encounter. And that takes a lot to change mindsets on both sides. Final answer.
Thank you. So at this time, we have, as I said, we are going to sort of give everyone space to speak and then hopefully get some input from the commissioners. The intention is this is a robust discussion. We want to hear from you, and maybe you want to ask questions of the commissioners. So for anyone that's new to the CPC meetings, I just want to encourage you you can always ask questions of the commissioners that are here to make this a two-way street. So next, I want to bring in a perspective from a slightly older group. This is from University of Washington. And so we have Timothy Billing. He is the ASUW president there. Timothy, could you introduce yourself and then please share your thoughts? I don't know if you caught my initial sort of broad question, but what are your thoughts and feelings about public safety, the police, the things that the CPC is charged to do, and for the people that you represent in your role, what are their thoughts? We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and I actually created some slides, but I don't know how much time you guys have allotted for my presentation specifically, so I want to make sure I acknowledge that.
You can certainly share your slides if you'd like.
Okay, perfect. Here, I'll just go ahead and share my screen. But yes, as you mentioned, my name is Timothy Billing. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the ACW president, so I represent all of the students at the University of Washington. And so just kind of going into safety, as some of the context, UW is unique in this term because we have our own police department for the University of Washington. And as many of you know, in 2020, there was a lot of protests and there were demands with the Black Student Union to defund and eventual abolition of our police presence at the campus. And so as crime has kind of gone up too as well, unrelated tensions have continued to climb. One of the problems that we kind of face at the University of Washington in terms of safety and policing is the jurisdiction. It's very complicated. As you can see, this is a map of the University of Washington. And the
So
large...
I just want to,
Yeah.
Timothy, I just want to interrupt you. So all we see is a black screen. So you might want to reshare your screen with where your presentation is.
Okay, yeah, no worries. That is
Happens to all of us.
I can see it just fine. Yeah.
Is this okay?
Okay.
I
Great.
can as well. Yep.
Yes, now we can see it. Thank you.
Nice
Awesome.
color coding. 10 out of 10.
Thank you. And so our jurisdiction is very difficult to kind of lay down for a lot of students as young people trying to figure out who is actually going to be responding to calls. UW PD is often much more responsive, but they are only in the dark gray areas. The lined area at the top is our Greek row, essentially, so where a lot of students live, and they have shared jurisdiction, which is a good idea, but it's also something that kind of needs to be revisited, and that's what we're hoping would be seen. So UW PD actually responds to minor complaints, so usually noise complaints in that area, and SPD responds to criminal calls. But the problems with this is that most students don't really know that, and it's not communicated to them. And so then it becomes very confusing about who actually is there for them. And so that's something that is a problem. The other thing is UW Alerts. This is a system that we have at the University of Washington where alerts get sent out if there's an active criminal incident that is very alarming and a threat to your safety, or if there's something happened and there needs to be more information just for awareness or for investigation. Problem is, though, these aren't done very effectively because a lot of it requires within that jurisdiction, or that the information is communicated by the Seattle Police Department to the University of Washington Police Department and then to the UW community. But there's been several instances this year where there has been severe safety issues, but the University of Washington Police Department has not gotten that information from the Seattle Police Department, or it wasn't communicated effectively. It wasn't communicated that it was an active scene, even though there were concerns. And so then it wasn't communicated to the community, and the community ended up feeling less safe because of that. The other thing is police contracts. This has been something that's been a big conversation with the police unions about trying to make sure that safety is evolving with the times and the needs of the community. And we've had some issues where the police unions view unarmed security as taking jobs away from police officers. But in reality, it's adapting safety to the needs of the community. And so that's been a problem that we're trying to work on, trying to making sure that whatever contracts do exist for police departments, that they are flexible to the times and the needs. The other thing that is really important for the university is property crimes for young people. We're going to college as well, and so our finances are extremely tight. And in the U district, there's a lot of low-income individuals, and so losing your car, having your home broken into, or your computer stolen, that's a very big deal. And for some people, it could be determined whether you are going to be homeless. And so the fact that one of the most common complaints I hear is that when they do report property crimes, Seattle Police Department or UW PD do not take it seriously. It's just kind of a slap in the face, because for a young person, that's literally your life and what's holding you together. And so that's something that we would like to see taken more seriously. The other thing is diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in terms of safety. Students want to ensure that the safety responses and measures are catered to the UW and the U District's diverse community. And so, and to eliminate implicit bias within this, I am a psychology major. I take a lot of neuroscience classes. I can go into all the neuroscience related to implicit bias and why effective training and effective acknowledgement that it exists and it is a real problem is needed. And so we're hoping that there would be continued conversations and continued accountability in terms of how safety is done to serve the most marginalized members of our community. And the other thing is just historical acknowledgement. Students want UWPD and SPD to acknowledge the history of police brutality that has and continues to harm marginalized communities within the greater Seattle area. And so some of the things that kind of summarize all of this that we would like to see is we would like to see annual meetings at the very least regarding jurisdiction with the University of Washington Police Department. It makes sense for UW to have its own safety measures and its own police department, but that can only be done if there's effective communication and it's continuing to adapt to the growing UW community. The other thing is we want to make sure that there's advocacy to ensure mental health professionals are leading calls related to individuals facing mental health challenges. This is a no-brainer. There's a lot of data to back it up. This is something that is needed and the community has continued to advocate for. And we would like to see this implemented even further within the Seattle area as well. The other thing is a crime victim fund for SPD and UWPD. This is something that just an idea of something that could be maybe expanded within the city or within the overall state, but just helping compensate individuals who potentially maybe lose their car or have their apartment broken into and can't stay there. Being able to provide immediate assistance through funds to be able for them to get by is a big part of that. And other things, just increased measures of diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We would like to see transparency related to this, effective training related to this, and continued oversight on this to make sure that the way safety is done is keeping these values at the forefront of all that we do. And that is all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Timothy. So we have another guest this morning, but because they are students, this is also someone from UW. This is Kennedy Patterson, and she is still in class and will be joining us at 9:30. So I think we should go ahead and start, open the discussion to questions from the commissioners for anyone that's presented so far. And then we'll jump into Kennedy's discussion when she shows up.
Actually, real quick on that one, Kennedy is actually unable to go. Her class she has to speak with her professor because we're approaching finals.
Yes, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Reverend Malden.
Thank you. My question is for Choose 180. I wanted to know, talk about some of the resources that they have available, and what is the excuse me, what is the recidivism rate? I mean, what percentage of the young people do reoffend?
Sorry, I think I could only hear part of that question. I heard something asked about the recidivism rate, and what was the second part?
Oh, the resources that are available for the youth through Choose 180.
Yeah, so we have an abundance of programs for young people. The program that I run is called the Youth and Young Adult Advocacy Program. So we have young people who come and learn about advocacy work in their community and build advocacy skills and identify and work on advocacy projects for their communities. We also have an aftercare program which provides wraparound services. Tasha actually may be better positioned to answer some of these questions. We have a gun violence prevention program. We have programs where we go into detention facilities and work with young people directly. We have an arts therapy program and mental health resources. We have counseling and talk therapy. We have, what am I missing, Tasha? School-based diversion programs where we go into Seattle schools and work with young people there. I want to give Tasha a chance to jump in case I'm forgetting something or missing something. Full disclosure, I'm relatively new to our org, so.
Oh, and you're doing great, Izzy. With the program that goes into the juvenile facilities, they work with young people for up to 6 months before they're released. And once they are released, they work with them on reentry to help them find resources for the things that they may need in the community and transition back into their communities while having some support. Looks like Suzette has a question.
Yeah, I see Commissioner Suzette Dickerson has a question.
Yes, so my question for the program is, what are the what kind of accountability does the program have in order to keep youth accountable to do these services? Is there any kind of accountability? Like, what can the program do if they don't appear?
If they don't appear, can you clarify a little bit more?
Sure.
You mean if we don't
If
see
they're
them or meet with them?
Correct. If they don't meet with you, or if they are entered into some kind of service and then they don't appear for the service, is there any kind of measures of accountability?
The ultimate accountability is with themselves and with the self. We try to establish that baseline in the first conversations, that the only person that they'll be cheating is themselves if they don't show up for their meetings with our aftercare navigators, or any of we have a lot of different names for our navigators, coordinators, navigators, our managers. So I'm going to, for this purpose, just say navigators. We have one program where we work with the prosecuting attorney's office for our diversions. So when they have a case that's diverted from the courthouse to us, that's the only program where there's some sort of like punitive response to them not showing up, because it's a case that would have gone through the court systems, and by the case being diverted, they won't have a record, or there will be no record of their being arrested. So ultimately, we set up the programs so that there's no punitive response to them not showing up. We do everything we can to establish a baseline or to establish a pathway for them to be successful. We create goals with them. And that's not in the first meeting also. It's a lot about trust building, and Izzy can tell you a ton about that. But most of it is about building trust with young people, getting them to understand, again, that what we're doing is for them. It's not for us. It's for them and for their well-being. And mostly they just want to know that there's people out there that care. And the response, a lot of times, I'll actually transfer back to Izzy and let Izzy speak on this. But the response, once they know that there's caring people out there, has been tremendous. And to answer Reverend Walden's question, our recidivism rate is measured. Unfortunately, the data that we have is only in 12-month increments. The city, I believe, has the 5 years. I think it's up to 5 years, but the measure is 92%. So the 92% recidivism rate, or I guess if you want to say it as in non-recidivism, they're not reoffending. So 8% would be the actual recidivism rate. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll add on to that too. I just want to point out that the word accountability is very loaded. It means different things to different people. So I think that I would want to know what accountability meant to you specifically. I think we often think of it in terms of punishment. And to that, I would say punishment doesn't work. It's not effective. We have all the research backing this up. We have all the experience, and we have, historical proof that punishment doesn't work. What works is providing access to resources. These kids are hungry for contributing in meaningful ways to their communities. They want to be thriving members of our society. They just often lack the ability to access their agency and resources to do so. The second that you open that door for them just to crack, they're busting through it. That is what happens in our programs that we see. I don't really have to convince our young people to show up or to engage in our programming very much, at least from my perspective and with my program. It's not something that, we're chasing them down, trying to force them to do under threat of punishment or accountability. It's something where we're saying, hey, here are resources and opportunities that we can help connect you with and that we can help facilitate you getting involved with, and they are jumping at those opportunities. So The times where I see them not engaging is when outside circumstances are impacting them in ways that don't allow them to engage reasonably. So a lot of these kids are coming from families where they have high expectations for helping care for siblings. They're overwhelmed with school. You know, they're like all of us are stuck in late stage capitalism and the rat race that is their everyday just trying to survive. And what we find is when we meet those basic needs that they desperately need to be able to achieve just to get by, that frees up the space for them to want to engage meaningfully and develop themselves and their community engagement in ways that are positive. When we see recidivism and we see folks backsliding or not holding themselves accountable, it's almost always, if you look at what the root cause of that or why that's happening, it's almost always because they are lacking a resource or an ability to choose something different or better or more positive in their life.
I saw a hand from Commissioner Alina Santillan.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is Commissioner Santillan. I just wanted to say, Izzy, I don't really have anything to add to that. I was just going to, my comment, the reason I lowered my hand was because I wanted to talk about the point you made that, you know, I think we view accountability a lot as a punitive measure rather than, especially sharing with young people that like, we care about you and are invested in your life. And there also being a distinguishing factor in when you're using the prosecutor's office. I'm stoked that Choose 180 folks are here. Lay, thank you for sharing your experience, and Tasha, just for just clarifying the work that Choose 180 does a little bit. But I do think it is important for the commission to I mean, I don't think we've ever defined accountability as a commission, and I think that that's really important. I think accountability gets a really bad rap, especially when we're talking about policing or over policing of Black and brown communities. So Izzy, thank you for clarifying just the accountability that you're talking about, and that being really rooted in restorative justice and not punitive measures.
Thank you. And I don't want to take up too much space or time, but I just wanted to add on while thinking about accountability. One of the things that I think is really, really important is that young people be involved in these conversations. I think it's disenfranchising to have a meeting about how the impacts to young people without young people present. And we have like one young person here. I'm not sure what all went into that decision-making process, but asking young people who are already overwhelmed and already overburdened to show up and talk about traumatizing experiences for free and during school hours in and of itself is like a harmful practice. I really want to strongly encourage the commission to figure out ways to connect with young people directly and hear what they have to say. Yeah, thank you.
I just have another question. Thank you so much for your comments and the presentation. As a mother, I've always used accountability and set high standards for raising my children. And so accountability to me meant, so I think, like you said, it does mean different things to different people and where you come from in life. And so, so I really appreciate that perspective that it does matter. How it's been used, and in fact, it's been used. It's everywhere now. It was not a household name 30 years ago, but it is now. Every walk of life. I mean, people are talking about accountability for for everything, and I think it's a good word. I mean, I think we have to, like you say, look at it, and but also as a parent, and then wrote a parent program. One of the things that I've done, one of the things that I think that what's get lost is parenting. And a lot of the groups, a lot of agencies doing good work is absolutely doing parenting work. And I do know that till sometimes they go right back into the same environment. I mean, because I run a lot of programs. Like I said, I wrote a parenting program called The Place of Excellence. And so do you have any contact with parents, or either any way to be able to bring parents up to date and come up with new models of parenting? Because we can do all the other programs, but they have to go back home into their own environment, and they spend some time there. And I know, just like when you go out on a great retreat, and then you have a good weekend, then you walk back in the door with your kids, and it's like, oh my God, you're back in the real deal. So anyway, I'm really happy about your program, and I know that you have a documentary out there. That's, I don't know if it's out yet, but it soon will be out about your trip, taking young people. If we got a few minutes, maybe want to just talk about that trip that you all took with Converge Media down south.
I'll let Tasha talk about the trip because she is much more eloquent to speak on that subject than I am. But I did want to say one more thing really quick about accountability, which is I think we also need to look at who are we holding accountable and how is that accountability working? When we know the disproportionate impacts of the criminal legal system is falling on Black, Brown, LGBTQIA+, and socioeconomically disadvantaged communities, we need to ask ourselves, like, is this accountability? Is letting rich white kids off because they can get lawyers and pay fines accountability, and criminalizing marginalized communities? So I just want to add that into the discussion as well. And then to the second piece about parenting, I will say that, the old adage of it takes a village to raise a child, we definitely find that to be true. And one of the things I love about working at Choose 180 is that our wraparound services aren't just impacting the young people, but we have ability to also impact issues going on in their family. So I have contact with young people's parents at their discretion. They're often involved in the work that we're doing. Parents are overwhelmed. I am a single parent of 2 young people myself. I just graduated from UW. I work full time. Parenting is really, really, really hard in the social climate that we have right now. I'm like looking over my shoulder, making sure my daughter's getting ready for school right now and thinking about running out the door while I'm in this meeting. Our parents are struggling and they need support from community as well, right? Like, we can't expect parents who have multiple children, are single parenting, are dealing with all the stresses of poverty and criminalization and all the other things that folks have going on in these communities to be able to parent at a super high level all the time. If you're working 2 jobs, if you're trying to manage multiple children, it is near impossible. Anyone who's working and has kids can tell you, even in 2-parent households, folks are struggling. So one of the things, we have a basic needs program. We're able to help folks with things like groceries, gave out shoes this week. We have socks, computers, like anything you can think of that our young people need. When we help provide that, it actually helps support the entire family dynamic. We help folks with rent when they're struggling. We can help folks with, utilities, internet access, all kinds of things like that benefit the entire family and take a little bit of that burden off so that parents are able to focus more on supporting their kids.
And I want to add really quickly that we can provide these things because we receive donations from the communities that we live in. We receive the supplies. We actually have an art drive that's happening right now to provide art supplies for our young people who are involved in or engaged in our counseling, our art therapy program. So we, appreciate having the ability to do that. And as an organization that we provide a central location for a lot of our participants and participants' families to be able to access these things through us and not have to go to these various different resources. We bring them to them. At least that's how we like to think about that. Kind of like a one-stop shopping. Oh, Joel?
Yeah.
I'm not the facilitator, but Joel?
Thank you, Tasha. I first want to just thank you, Tasha and Izzy, for all of the work that you do. It's just so critical to everything that we're trying to do in our community, and it's so valuable. So first, I want to say thank you, and I also want to thank Lee for sharing your experience and being here today. And I really appreciate everything you've all said so far. And my questions are kind of more I'm sorry, I asked a few questions. That's, my problem with being afflicted by being a lawyer. My questions are more along the lines of thinking about what the CPC authority is and what we can do to help. And we have the authority, we have general authority to review SPD policy and advocate for policies at the city and state level, for example. And so, I heard you talk about, including some specific examples from Lee, about how some of these interactions with police are not positive. In fact, they're negative. And so I was hoping to learn a little bit more about, to the extent that there are positive interactions, what do those look like? And is there something we can do to encourage more of the interactions that do happen to be more like that, to be positive? That's one question. Two, how can we minimize or mitigate the interactions that are negative? And then three, what can the CPC do as a partner to help generally on all of these issues? What are some policies at SPD that we should be looking at and helping with, along with Choose 180 and other community groups, to improve the interactions or minimize the negative interactions? What are some policies at the state level that we can help advocate for? Generally, how can we partner? How can we scale up? What can we do to help? So sorry for the multiple questions, but those were the things that were on my mind.
Do you want to go first, Izzy?
I'm good either way. I would love for you to talk more about the community responders. You're muted, Tasha.
Okay. Yeah, something was going on my screen. The co-responder, is that what you're talking about? The co-responder model? Okay. Well, I will address that one. One of the things that I wanted to respond to your question, Joel, with was in thinking about something that Timothy mentioned, and that is implicit bias training. I don't know how much training goes into, or if that is a part of some of the trainings for our police, but I think one of the big things about implicit bias is first recognizing and having the awareness that it exists. Simply because we all experience implicit bias doesn't mean that we have to act on that. The implicit bias is something that, again, like I just said, but it's something that we all have. It's the nature versus nurture thing. It's something that's there. It's inherent in us. But what it's up to us is how we act on that. So if you do understand that when you're, if you are biased against in specific situations, or when you're walking up to certain groups of people or young people, then to reframe or retrain your brain to think about that situation and not go into it with the bias that you already know that you have. In taking those tests, I don't think that it's, I don't know that they're 100% scientifically rated, but we've probably all taken those implicit bias tests and then been surprised, like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that even existed. I mean, but if you think about it, you probably did, but didn't want to acknowledge it. So again, I think that a lot of it is about is understanding or having the awareness that you do have a bias in certain situations. And I think that will be a large part of that. I know that as the CPC, we have the police accountability, is our accountability team, police accountability. And again, maybe redefining what does accountability mean? What does that look like? We have our, or at least we used to, the mental health committee. And I think that in both of those, we could call for more accountability in understanding. Again, I just can't stress enough for me how important I think that it is to understand what implicit bias is and how we can get that into some form of regulated, required training. And I don't have a slick segue into the co-responder model, but one of the things that I have been talking about with our staff, because honestly, we've had a lot of pushback about working with Burien PD and about working with the police from our staff. And on one hand, I'd love to say that I was surprised, but I'm really not, because a lot of the interactions from our staff, who are folks with lived experiences, who are Black and brown bodies, have not been positive. So what I'm even working on right now is reframing the mindsets that this is something that we should honestly all want. We should want to move in this direction, because this will allow us to move towards what one of the words that folks love to use is defunding police, moving those dollars, reallocating those dollars to organizations that actually do the work, reallocating those dollars to organizations that are in the communities. We're going through trainings right now with the police. Well, our navigator will go through the trainings, and the police officers will also, they'll go through the exact same trainings and get the same trainings to understand how to engage with the community. And eventually, and I was saying before, so I don't want to keep repeating myself, but the goal is to not have a co-responder model, but to have an alternative to policing. I don't have a better word for it right now, but have a model that offers that altogether, instead of calling the police officer to a situation. So we don't know exactly what that's going to look like right now. We're working together with Burien PD to build that out and figure out what that can be and what that looks like. And we also received a grant that it's a 2-year grant, so that's not super long. We're hoping to be able to extend that. But the really good thing is that it's not a 1-year grant. So I'm really excited that we have the funding to go into this model with at least 2 years to pilot, and then refine, go back to the drawing board, and then continue to work with Burien PD to create these policing alternatives. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, Joel, about what can the CPC do, but maybe there's something in there that we can find that would be able to be a niche space or a gap where the CPC could be helpful in these different situations with interactions with young people and the policing.
Thank you, Tasha. I have a quick follow-up question to that, if I could. One, has Choose 180, this pilot project that you're working on with Burien PD, has Choose 180 had any discussions with SPD about doing something like that in Seattle? And if so, do you see a role for CPC to play on something like that? That's my question for you. And then also, I believe we have, my understanding is we may have some folks from SPD on the line, and I don't know if they're able to speak about the current state of implicit bias training, just so we can kind of have more information on that and whether that's something that should be looked into more.
Can I just add one thing on to what Tasha said?
Yeah, please.
I think implicit bias training, I think part of the issue there is that it's not going to get to the root of the problem, which is that the structure of policing is implicitly biased. We can try to train individuals, but when we look at what neighborhoods are being policed, who's being policed and how, it's inherently biased. And the entire structure would need to change if we're really going to get to the root of that problem. So while, I think any steps in a positive direction are good, and I would support to some degree, it feels often like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. I think we need to look at real systemic solutions, things like not sending an armed militarized response to like a child having a mental health crisis. right? Like we need to have other resources, and they need to be fully and robustly resourced to be able to respond to that, because policing and the criminal legal system is not a system that can actually help in that situation. And what we're finding over and over is that that sort of response is causing more harm rather than helping to resolve issues. So I think realizing that police shouldn't be called in the vast majority of the calls that they are sent to, and instead having more appropriate responses like mental health practitioners, social services, crisis responders, EMTs, folks who can actually have the expertise and the training and are coming from the perspective of solving the actual issue at hand. And I think part of that, systemically is a resourced issue, right? We haven't resourced those options to the extent that they are able to organize a citywide, statewide, countrywide response. And I think that's part of what the program that Tasha's talking about, the co-responder program, is trying to help resolve, right? Is how can we get appropriate responders to these locations when incidents are occurring to help resolve them in positive ways for our communities.
Sorry, if I jump in as well, I'd love to make a comment. Of course. So in terms of what the discussion right now is surrounding implicit bias, from the NACOL conversation, let me turn on my video. From the NACOL conference that staff went to back in September, there was an entire about hour-and-a-half long session dedicated to the importance of implicit bias training and de-escalation training. However, a lot of the current research and data is showing that de-escalation training is the #1 method of reducing police violence and in restoring a lot of better interactions with the community. Implicit bias training is a great starting point for officers to kind of become aware of the various biases that we all have and not really aware of. But the best trainings to really invest into are de-escalation trainings. And so not saying that implicit bias initial trainings aren't important. They are. It's great as initial onboarding, especially potentially before the badge conversations. But the main focus and the biggest changes that we've seen within data and reducing police violence is through de-escalation trainings and tactics. And that was a big conversation at the NACOL conference, which for folks on the line, NACOL stands for National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement.
So I see Commissioner Legea Washington.
Hi, I think Alina had their hand up first.
Leger, go ahead. You go for it.
Thank you. I just was curious about I guess I just wanted to say that I agree that it's important that implicit bias training be emphasized. Although a de-escalation training probably saves lives. The implicit bias it's probably really important, especially for folks like myself who've had like interactions with officers as recent as the end of last year, where, I don't know if it's because they see someone's race that they want to use terms like baby mama and baby daddy when the people they're interacting with don't even use those terms. So for those reasons, I just want to say implicit bias is probably very, very important when it comes to officers engaging with community members.
Alina?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, Izzy, thank you for naming, oh my gosh, all the things that you're naming in this meeting. I don't have any emojis, which probably wouldn't be the most professional thing to do this meeting, but if I could, I would give you all of them. I just want to acknowledge too that yes, the implicit bias training is great, but I would love to hear from FPD the type of questions or screenings that you're doing before people become police officers. I'm not really interested in people that already become police officers and then maybe they're problematic after the fact. And I would also say that, you know, we kind of use this implicit bias language, especially in very quote unquote progressive, liberal, white Seattle, when I feel like sometimes we're not talking about the real issue of racism. And I would love to just point out that I want to hear what are the anti-racist training, you know, obviously equity work is intersectional. So we want to think about things like ability and age and class and all of those things, but really the city's race social justice initiative, they lead with race. I think it would be great for all of us when we're thinking about equity to lead with race too. So I'd love to hear from SPD. What kind of screenings are you doing? You screen people for mental health, you screen people for crimes, you know, for drugs, or, you know, what are all that what are the crimes you've committed that you've never been caught for, but what are the things around racism and intersectional equity that you're asking people before they actually become police officers? Because it is right. I mean, the institution of policing is racist and intersectional. But I'm not talking about individuals. We're talking about the structure and the institution. So again, not talking about individuals, but I think it's really important to acknowledge that. And I know that Mark wants to say something something too, but I'd love to hear from SPD just around, like, how are you screening people for that?
Well, I see Brian Maxey here and he has his hand up, so maybe he can answer that.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. You know, I'm not going to be able to answer all these questions on the fly, but I will do my best to sort of give an overview of this. We have been doing implicit bias trainings for well over a decade now, and we've had them provided from community, from the Office of Civil Rights, from national programs in anti-racism and implicit bias trainings. We've been doing that for a long time. We certainly have also been working very hard on de-escalation in a variety of manners. And in fact, I think much of the state trainings that are being rolled out are based on the SPD model, and certainly some of the national standards are as well. What we don't do anymore is simply say we're going to go have a de-escalation training. It is woven into all of our scenario-based training. So when an officer engages in reality-based training, the expectation is that they are going to have to navigate issues of de-escalation, but also issues of bias on the fly, and instructors are going to debrief the skills and increase compassion and understanding. Before the badge program, we've had presentations here previously where we are trying to directly be trained by the community and hear what the community expectations are. This is going to increase understanding and communication. And in saying all this, I am not saying we have it right yet, because we are trying to take this to the next level in our training program, which Chief DS has framed as relational policing, where, and this is what Before the Badge is designed to do, is to introduce new recruits as early as possible to the community to start building those relationships directly, because it's all well and good to have it theoretical and on paper, but if you don't know people, I don't think those trainings are as effective. So we're in the process of hiring a relational policing coordinator that's going to look at our entire training and governance programs in SPD to ensure that we are being as community focused as possible. To the greater issues about, policing itself and dismantling that and alternatives, SPD's been a leader in promoting alternative response within the city. We started the first co-responder model well over a decade ago, and we continue to work and partner with the city in trying to develop different alternatives to, we have problems. We have social fabric issues, we have crime issues, we have mental health issues, we have addiction issues, we have cultural issues. It's a messy society that we live in, and we are fully open to different approaches on how to bring solutions to those problems, or at least increase our role in harm reduction. So listening, happy to answer the other questions, and I'm also happy to give specific responses to the pre-screening question that Alina had asked. I think the broad brushstroke is that the psychological tests that we give include bias screenings. And having just done this personally last week, I can tell you there's a huge number of questions designed to parse out bias and the potential for discriminatory action later as a police officer. But I'm happy to get you more information on that. I'll stop talking now.
Officer Mark Mullins, did you want to comment?
I just wanted to say one thing. I do appreciate everyone's efforts in terms of SPD and youth and the community coming together, and I appreciate everybody's efforts in this arena. I would just like to say that a lot of times police officers, when dealing with juveniles and youth, would like to have some alternative policies to basically taking them to jail in certain instances. We would love to have alternatives. So if that can be worked out or we can make some gains in that, it will probably assist us a little bit in the negativity that happens between officers and youth. Sometimes we have no alternative but to take them to jail. We don't have any other resource. We'd love resources, and we'd love dual responses. I think sometimes we look intimidating sometimes in certain situations where we're not needed. Not saying we're not needed, but sometimes we need to take a step back and allow people who are more in that profession to deal with the problem at the time. So if we can continue to work on that, that would be great. Thank you.
Izzy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to say a little bit tongue in cheek, but in all honesty, like, send them to us. You got young people who need some intervention. Like, there are community organizations out there doing this work and who are passionate about and who have capacity to take them. And I don't want to, speak for my whole organization, but I'll give you my card. Feel free to call me. There are other resources out there, and I think it's great to hear that SPD is open to abdicating some of that work towards better community-based solutions, because I think that is a move in the right direction. But the other thing I wanted to say is I want to revisit the accountability conversation briefly and say, we often get asked about what are our recidivism rates? What is the accountability for young people who are in our programs? How do we make sure that they're not reoffending or that they're engaging? But I don't see that being asked for the alternate criminal legal system. And I think when we go toe to toe with them, so to speak, and show our progress, our recidivism rates, and the data that we have now showing that our programs work. And when you compare those to the recidivism rates and the data and the harm that's being caused by the criminal legal system, it's really easy to see who we need to be holding accountable. And it's not the community-based solutions. I love to ask how the Seattle Police Department is being held accountable for the impacts that they're having on our communities.
Officer Mark Mullins, are you raising your hand?
Yes, my hand is up. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So a lot of times I think in terms of department policy and in terms of a general police officer who is on the street, who has to make a decision and doesn't want to make a mistake that's going to cause him to be in trouble or end up not doing his job, he tends to lean towards what policy is. And I would appreciate your card and I would immediately go to my sergeant and say, hey, can I use this as an alternative to maybe arresting this kid or maybe putting this kid in the system? It would be wonderful. Another comment I wanted to make about bias training, or non-bias training. It is true we get it. We've been getting it for years. So when I hear the word defunding, it kind of detracts from that. How are we going to get all this training if we're defunded? So if we can work on not so much talking about this is when police officers become deflated when they hear that word. So if we can work together on doing the things we need to do and getting our training, and not defund, but fund, so that we could have more training and have more tools and have more resources to work together with the community. Thank you.
So we only have a few minutes left. Does anyone want to have a last word here in this conversation?
Lieutenant Davis, does he have anything to add?
Pardon?
Yeah, Lieutenant.
Oh, Lieutenant Davis, welcome.
Right on cue. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. Hey, great conversation. This is my first time attending the CPC meeting, and a lot of the things that was said by everybody involved really resonated with me. I think Chief Maxey and Officer Mullins really covered many of the things or many of the concerns that people brought up. So, I mean, I would only add that, first, like piggybacking on what Officer Mullins just said, I mean, I think right now our agency is really trying to work on going away from this policy-driven response to things, because yes, officers are concerned about doing their job or reluctant to do their job because they're afraid they're going to be criticized or put in trouble for doing their job or get in trouble for doing their job. And I think, that's where we're moving now, from trying to get away from a policy-driven policing to a value-based policing. I think is what you're talking about. I think what Officer Moses is talking about is really trying to do what's right and what's best for the officers, and for the community members, the young community members that we engage every day. So I'm all open to having those conversations. A lot of the things you said, Izzy, especially, I think are important to me. You talked about some of the impacts that criminalizing youth has on the family members. I currently am part of the Collaborative Policing Bureau, and I manage the CSOs. So our community service officers are out there doing a lot of that work. And while we may not be able to have a full co-responder model for certain things, we are, asked by patrol often or detectives often to engage community members. Like short story, recently we just had 3 kids who were arrested for very serious crimes. But 2 of the 3 kids, this is the first time their family even knew they were engaged in this type of activity. So, the police precinct captain asked our community service officers to go out, reach out to the family, make some referrals, see how we can support them. That's the kind of things that the CSOs are doing. And we have CSOs with huge backgrounds in supporting youth. So, and we want to be able to partner with you, Izzy, or any other agencies out there who are willing to, where we can make referrals and basically get people the help that they need. So I think, let's sit down, let's have those conversations, let's meet, outside of this arena, and let's see what we can do to support our community members. We've lost so many people, so on our department, so we're really going to be reliant on other city departments and community members and community groups to kind of partner and kind of really help keep and make our city safe. So that's it. And I think the last thing I want to leave with, the negative interactions, like the biggest thing is just encourage community members to let us know. We can't fix these interactions. We can't figure out what happened or what went wrong if we don't know about it. So, just call a supervisor, make the complaints. We want to nip any type of poor behavior right away. So if we got officers referring to a female community member as a baby mama, like that's not appropriate. We don't accept that. We don't condone that. So just let us know. We'll address it. We'll fix it. You know, we're all about trying to be the best department we can be in the nation, and that's where we're working towards. So that's all I got.
Well, thank you very much for your words here. I want to thank deeply Lay, Izzy, Commissioner Tasha Johnson, and Timothy for joining us for this important discussion. As I said, the ordinance calls on us to reach out to a wide variety of communities in Seattle, and the youth community, including college students who are sometimes guests in Seattle, are all very important members that we want to make sure that we listen to and account to. So thank you very much. This portion of the agenda is complete, and please reach out to any of us, CPC or commissioners, if you want any follow-up or any further communication on this. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're on updates.
Now we are on CPC updates. Would it make sense to do the executive director update first?
Sure.
Okay.
I can do that. Okay. So we are making slight changes to the agenda. We'll start with the executive director update first. Okay. So I have some comments to make. This is my first sort of speech or discussion or update as the interim executive director. And I want to say that this year is incredibly important for the city of Seattle. After the shooting of woodcarver John T. Williams by the Seattle Police Department in 2010, 34 organizations signed on to a letter to bring the Department of Justice to Seattle. The community has been working with the federal government for over 11 years, but now is the time to bring this responsibility back to us, the community here in Seattle. The Community Police Commission is important because everyone in the city of Seattle needs, as our governing ordinance states, effective constitutional policing and a police department that has the trust, respect, and support of the community. The CPC has a vital role to play in ensuring police accountability in our city. It provides important analysis and policy recommendations that are meant to ensure the integrity of our law enforcement system, one in which police officers are entrusted with extraordinary life and death powers. In 2017, the community and city leaders working together made a strong system of civilian oversight of policing part of the laws that govern this city. This system was thoughtfully designed to incorporate community input to build a strength that other cities struggled with in their own civilian oversight systems by including, and I quote, the voice and values of the community that is being policed. These voices may not always be the loudest, but it is our charge at CPC to learn from them. These voices may not speak English as we do, or want to speak in front of crowds, or even, such as young children, be able to voice their needs and values. But it is our job at the Community Police Commission, spelled out in our governing ordinance, to learn about the values and interests of all communities, not just the loudest ones. The city of Seattle is hurting. The most recent crime report shows that violent crime has increased. Homicides have increased by 24% over 2021, while rapes and aggravated assaults have increased almost 5% in the same time. There have been 10 homicides in Seattle so far in 2023, 10 lives lost to violence, each of which was precious and valuable in their own humanity. In South Lake Union, downtown, Mount Baker, Georgetown, Rainier Valley, Wallingford, and Ballard, few parts of the city have been spared from the tragic effects of violence just this year. Effective constitutional policing is one critical component of safety for these communities and their residents. Not all communities are affected in the same way by this violence. I volunteer with victims of domestic violence, and they need effective constitutional policing to protect themselves and their families from violent abuse. While human services support systems are critical to helping survivors recover from the effects of trauma, what systems, what people are there to stop a violent partner from physically attacking again? No one deserves to be victimized by the police, and no one deserves to be victimized by those who wish to do them harm. This system was developed to help the community as a whole bring the strengths and legal authority of constitutional policing to protect the entire community, including victims of violence. This is why the Community Police Commission is so important. Our guiding document is the ordinance that established the CPC pursuant to the federal consent decree in 2012. This ordinance ensures that the commission's composition must include representatives from every corner of the city and reflect Seattle's diverse population with members drawn from different racial, economic, and ethnic groups. The ordinance also stipulates that each commissioner must have a reputation for integrity and professionalism, a firm commitment to responsible and responsive law enforcement, and the ability to work with others to achieve objectives. Chief among these is the goal of ensuring public confidence in the effectiveness and professionalism of the Seattle Police Department. The CPC is specifically charged with engaging the community to develop recommendations regarding the police accountability system and provide a community-based perspective on law enforcement-related policies, practices, and services. My goals as interim executive director are to make CPC a functional, resilient organization that can fulfill this statutory role. To this end, we need to be fully staffed to engage all of Seattle's diverse communities effectively. With their input, we will be effective and reliable policy advocates at the city, county, and state levels. In my new role, I'm committed to enhancing public trust in the CPC by implementing evidence-based approaches to our work that incorporate best practices from other civilian oversight organizations across the country while respecting the distinct voices of the Seattle community. I will work closely with the CPC commissioners and staff to bring the community together using the requirements set forth in our ordinance. I would add that it is also critical that we rebuild trust with our partners, the Office of Police Accountability, the Office of Inspector General, and the Seattle Police Department, as well as our elected officials and community leaders. I'm incredibly optimistic about our future and our ability to bring meaningful change. To do that, I believe we must work toward a broad and deep definition of community and value and support one another. We all care about justice. We wouldn't be here doing this challenging work if we didn't. And sometimes we get caught up in our perspectives and points of view and fail to show respect and care for one another. Valuing community and supporting one another are the stated goals of the city and ones that we too are working towards every day. The city's racial and social justice initiative speaks to the sustainability of this by centering the health and well-being of those most impacted by the history of racism, stating that far from a checklist, anti-racism is an orientation to ourselves and the world, which we nourish and grow through our daily actions and reflections. Our daily actions and reflections as board members and staff of the CPC will help guide us in our important work in the coming years. At some point, the city will be ready to move beyond the consent decree. When it does, we must have civilian oversight system ready to step up and play its role. I pledge to do my utmost to gain your trust and confidence, and I look forward to joining with you to help make Seattle a safer and more vibrant city for all its residents.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Thank you for all the work you've been doing as our interim director. And that does bring us to the executive director updates. And I don't know if Reverend Hunter is still on the line. I know she had a conflicting engagement. Reverend Hunter did prepare some remarks for this moment and to talk about Colley's work. And she asked that I read them in the event she's not here. And I don't see her, so I'll go ahead and read her remarks from Reverend Hunter. The mission of the CPC is to champion policing practices centered in justice and equity. Our commitment to our mission and to serving impacted communities of Seattle is solid under the leadership of our interim director, Dr. Colley Ellis. Dr. Ellis has efficiently, energetically, and enthusiastically moved the CPC forward since January 10th, 2023. Dr. Ellis has reached out to the directors of our accountability partners, city department heads, and other justice organizations to expand and improve relationships. Dr. Ellis's passion for justice and equitable policies has impacted Washington state legislation in the short period of time she has been with the Seattle CPC. She has earned the respect of the co-chairs and staff. Thank you, Colley, for stepping up and saying yes to leading the CPC during this transitional time. And I would like to say, as a co-chair, that I would like to echo Reverend Hunter's sentiments. I would say that the CPC has been doing a lot of work recently, reaching out to our partners. Staff has been, we've hired new staff. The work groups are getting going. we've been doing a lot of work on legislative advocacy in Olympia, partnering with other organizations, advocating for legislation that the commission has approved at our meetings. And so I too want to thank Dr. Ellis for her leadership, and I share your optimism.
And thank you. I'd like to echo all of that, and also say your enthusiasm that you bring, your high integrity, and your willingness to just go to work. I mean, you've done an amazing job in moving us forward. Amazing job in getting, the staff is getting a quorum and engaging with the commissioners. All of that is a welcome change as we move forward. And thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you very much.
As far as co-chair updates, there are not a lot of co-chair updates at this time, but I would like to at least mention that there are a number of individuals who have expressed interest in joining the commission as new commissioners, some for some of the specific designated slots that are established under the ordinance. We have interviews scheduled with these prospective candidates. We're grateful for their energy and enthusiasm and interest, and we look forward to hopefully introducing some new commissioners to everyone soon. In addition to that, the co-chairs are receiving reports from staff that the work groups are making progress, are starting to meet more regularly. We're grateful for each commissioner for the time that they are putting into their work groups and space that they're making to meet with staff to move those issues forward. So thank you for your continued work on the work groups. And to that end, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kali to see if there's any work group updates this week.
Sure. So I can speak to state legislative agenda, which is something that I still do. It's very interesting to me. So state legislative agenda work group, as everyone knows, if you're following along with my Twitter updates, which are every single week, we are going through a number of different cutoffs in the original House. The most recent cutoff was on Friday, so that was the fiscal cutoff. So the process of how these bills go through these is that these are basically a number of different hurdles they have to pass until they get all the way to the governor's desk. So some of the bills that we have been following and been looking at are no longer viable at this point. We'll probably see them again next year. There's probably going to be changes and modifications, but I want to highlight a few that are still in the process. So they're potentially things that are going to make it to the floor and possibly to the other house. So we all signed off as a commission on House Bill 1025. This bill was about qualified immunity. This was also part of the co-chair's Seattle Times op-ed, as you may remember. This bill is now in the rules process. So it's not exactly clear what's going to happen to it, but they can be pulled from rules to be voted on the floor. So if you're watching on TVW, the very useful resource about how to engage with the legislative process from home, you can watch floor debates where they'll talk about some of these bills along with others. There is a bill that we've been following, and I mentioned this a few weeks ago, that has passed all the way out of House of Origin. So that means that it went all the way through the House, it passed all the hurdles, and now it's going to be handed over to the Senate. That bill is creating a missing and murdered Indigenous women and people cold case investigations unit in the Attorney General's office. And that bill is number House Bill 1177. You may have also noticed in the news that vehicular pursuit is still alive. These are actual rollbacks to the 2021 status. The way that the bill looks right now, it has a little bit of something that everyone is going to like and a little bit of something that everyone is not going to like. There's a lot of modifications and amendments on that bill, but that one is currently in the Rules 2 process. So it's may or may not be heard on the floor. You may remember also from our discussion 2 weeks ago that that bill is in conjunction with bills that include study groups, and this bill has a sunset. So it's to give the opportunity to change the rules and give the study groups enough time to come up with model policies for vehicular pursuit. Another bill that has been very interesting that we talked about and voted on is House Bill 1513. This is Representative Street's bill. This is about improving traffic safety. And there's been a number of modifications, there will continue to be so, but the original intent of the bill was to reduce interactions with drivers primarily and police officers by removing the ability to pull people over for things like expired tabs or broken tail lights. So minor things that are on the car that don't actually fully reduce the functionality of the car and are not actual speeding or other types of violations. So that bill, interestingly, went to the Transportation Committee in the House and is going to be heard in the Transportation Committee in the Senate. And it's sure to be some very interesting floor debates and discussions on this bill. Again, this was a CPC supported bill. So I'm happy to fill you in if there's any other specific bills that anyone is interested in. We track a lot of bills, my staff and I, and this is something that is very interesting to me, even in my new position as interim executive director. I'm always going to want to know what the result is of these bills. So that's pretty much the report from the State Legislative Agenda Work Group.
Thank you, Collie. I actually have a follow-up question for you and possibly Commissioner Jeremy Wood. I know when we had the conversation, I believe it was either 2 or 4 weeks ago on the traffic safety bill that you just mentioned, that there was some discussion of advocating for an amendment to the bill to strengthen it and to really ensure that anytime an officer pulls a motorist over it's related to a public safety issue. And I think Commissioner Wood had some pretty good ideas on how to do that. Do we have an update on where those potential amendments are, or whether they are, there's any member that is considering carrying the water on those potential amendments that we've proposed?
So Commissioner Wood?
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Collie. I don't personally have an update. That's owing to a busy calendar on my own end. I would be very happy to connect with Collie or our new senior policy advisor to continue pursuing that. I look forward to connecting.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Jeremy, but I do appreciate the work you did there. And I thought those are very valuable ideas, and I'd love to see it move forward if we can.
Yeah, so I reached out to Senate staff because there's a Senate companion bill on the same topic, and the mover is going to be the House bill. So they've had a public hearing on the Senate bill. This is from Senator Valdez. They had a public hearing to sort of get it going. That's also in the Transportation Committee, but the mover is going to be the House, which means we need to wait. We can either try to do a floor amendment in the next few days, or we can wait for it to pass out of the House and then try to do the amendment process over in the Senate. That was my recommendation as staff.
I think that recommendation makes sense, and at least on my end, I would defer to that wisdom on process and stand available to help advocate for that as much as possible. I will note I still need to connect with him, but counsel for Uzziah Falatogo in his suit against the city, or his estate and his family's suit against the city, which arose from a bad stop, has agreed to work with us in coordinating possible testimony in support of an amendment. So just putting that out there once we're able to connect with an appropriate legislator to either make a floor amendment or put it forward in other fashion.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the next item of business is new staff. I'm very excited about this. We have 2 brand new staff that today is their first day. One is a policy staff and one is community engagement staff. This is getting us closer to our goal of being fully staffed at the CPC. So I'm going to ask our new senior policy advisor, Nina Martin, to give a brief introduction first.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Nina Berhimi Martin. I use she, her pronouns. I am so delighted to be joining the CPC and getting to know all of you. Before joining you all, I was policy analyst at the ACLU Washington, and I got to work on a number of different policy issue areas, foremost policing, but also technology, immigrant rights, and issues related to youth policy like juvenile justice and the school to prison pipeline, and of course all the intersections between these different issue areas. Before that, I was in grad school. I went to grad school because I was interested in kind of learning the tools to examine systems of oppression and power, and so got my research training there. I'm really excited to bring my policy advocacy experience and my research training to this role, to get to know all the commissioners and to really engage them more and really understand what their vision for public safety and policing here in Seattle is. Yeah, so looking forward to working with all of you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our new community engagement specialist, Joe Nathan Thomas. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name's Joe Nathan. This is school about this. That my dad's first officer that I got to know. He was a military police officer in the Air Force, and so and he instilled a lot of great values in me. I heard Lieutenant Davis talk about values and a lot of things that he put into me. That's it just makes this moment come full circle. He even worked as a court reporter. He wanted to get into law, but then he decided to do court reporting. So I spent a lot of my upbringing, talking to me early, being in these offices, space like this was kind of cool seeing this come full circle. Just a bit about me, born and raised in Seattle. Spent a lot of time here. My family started off roots in the Central District. Spent a lot of time in the Rainier Valley. Eventually moved out to Renton. And in that time, saw a lot of changes in the city. Saw a lot of changes in policing in the city as demographics changed and social economics changed. Had a lot of family that was caught up in a lot of life. I say that because that spawned me to that created something in me to want to be able to respond to it, to seeing the differences that were happening, seeing how they were getting caught in this, wanted to do something about it. I started to do a lot of work with youth and I'm sorry, there's a lot that's going through my head. It's a great moment, but no, all to say is just in that process, so a lot of work working with youth. I spent kindergarten to college, I like to say. A lot of the work that I've done, vast work with kindergarten to college, working as a social worker, mental health specialist, directing programs for youth, getting them into college, working at the University of Washington as an academic advisor, a lot of different things working on just, again, thinking about my childhood, my family, working to make sure that they didn't make some of the same mistakes that I saw a lot of people make, and working to give them an opportunity. And along the way, I got a chance to work with a lot of great police officers while coaching and doing other things, even into the profession. They were making an impact with these youth. And so I know a lot of times we get to see or hear about cops that aren't doing their job, but there are a lot of good cops that are out there doing their job. And so I felt like in my work, I was able to bridge that gap a little bit, and coming into this position again, I'm glad to get the opportunity to be able to do the same thing, to be able to kind of work to bridge that gap, connecting the community, connecting SPD, and hopefully come up with some great ideas for the future.
Well, we were so excited to have you both. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very lucky to have you. Thank you. Recognize Reverend Walden for a minute.
Thank you. Police Commission would like to acknowledge and give condolence to the family of Malik Davis. He was an aide to Councilmember Peterson's office, and just extend our condolence to the family and also to Councilmember Peterson and his staff.
Thank you, Reverend Walden. Mr. Davis has provided so much value to the city, and it's very sad that he's gone, but thank you for your words and condolences to his family. That brings us to department updates. First, acknowledge the city council is, I see Newell's on the line. Newell, do you have an update for us?
Thank you. The Public Safety and Human Services Committee met yesterday and had a briefing with the Community Safety and Communications Center about software for their 911 protocols. The call center is the first point of contact for 911 calls, so there are procedures for handling those calls that are very important in how any alternative dispatches, alternative responses are incorporated into city responses. The presentation they shared is available at the committee website. It includes a hypothetical 911 call that shows how it could end up being directed to either the fire department or police department and fire department, or a dual dispatch with a civilian mental health responder. Councilor Herbold's office is working with SPD on a briefing next month on hiring, recruitment, and retention. And yesterday, council adopted the work plan, including the Public Safety and Human Services Committee work plan, and shared that with the co-chairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Newell. Is anyone from the mayor's office to provide an update? Seeing none. Is anyone from the monitoring team here? I see Mr. Ward.
Good morning, members of the Community Police Commission. I would like to express congratulations, plaudits, and kudos to Dr. Kelly Ellis on your selection as interim executive director, and also to Felicia Cross on your recent appointment as a member of NACOLA. The monitor team continues to work on our accountability assessment of the accountability partners in the city of Seattle. That continues to be a work in progress. Interviews are continuing. We also continue to work with other entities in the city towards crafting of a transition agreement with regard to the future status of the consent decree. That's the extent of my report this morning. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Ward, and we look forward to seeing final products of both of those items. Is anyone from the Department of Justice here to provide an update?
Yeah, hey, good morning. Matt Waldrop from the U.S. Attorney's Office. No update from the department today.
Thank you, Matt. Office of Police Accountability. Hi, Katie, I see you're on mute.
You're muted.
Still on mute.
We can't hear you.
There you go. Nope, still can't hear you. I wonder if it says you're not on mute, but I wonder if your mic is not working. No, still can't hear you. Shoot. We can't hear anything you're saying. Yeah, there you go.
That works. Okay. We don't usually use Zoom, and there's two mics up top, so I just touched a different button. Classic technology. So I apologize and thank you for your patience. I do want to first note that I took a significant amount of notes during this meeting to relay some of that feedback and conversation back to OPA to continue to be good partners in that, and also recognizing, even with Choose 180, I was like, oh, that's an organization that would be helpful if we reached out to in a partnership way. From the OPA perspective, we're still doing a lot of hiring, which is both exciting, and I know CPC can appreciate a lot of work as well, and partnering in that together. But we've brought on, a new communications manager who I know has already begun partnering with CPC, which is exciting, and a new policy manager starts end of March. We seem to be tracking CPC and that we are also tapping into the academia world and bringing in a professor as well. So that's exciting. A few other things we've just been doing that I think are important is taking the time to review a lot of our internal processes. So updating classification notifications that are sent to community members and making sure that they're more, they're updated to the process, they're informed. An example of this was OPA has two types of investigations, an expedited investigation or a full investigation. And we knew at the point when things would be expedited, but we were informing community members just because it was an older process that hadn't been reviewed, that it was still, they would just get the standard investigation process. So doing some small things like that to make sure we're telling the full story and working with community out of transparency. So continuing to do that and open to more feedback and carrying along Juno's Director Bet's projects as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Katie. It is 10:40. I know it's the end of our meeting, but without any objection, I'll go ahead and hear an update from the OIG and SPD if there are any. Is OIG here?
Yes.
Oh, hello.
I'll be,
Sorry.
hi. I'll be brief. Thanks for the robust discussion today, and congratulations to all the new staff and to Kali on the new position. We are wrapping up a few audits and finalizing the report for the Wave 4 SARE panel, and also doing a little bit of hiring as well. And I think that's it for us. So keeping it brief and we can move on. Thanks.
Thank you. And then the last department update is from SPD.
Thank you, and I'll keep it brief. I just want to echo the congratulations for all the new staff and Director Ellis. And I also want to echo the condolences to Malik Davis's family and to Councilmember Peterson's office and staff. Malik was a trusted friend and colleague and a great voice of wisdom in the city, and he will be greatly missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And that does bring us to the end of our agenda, albeit a couple minutes late, but we did run a rather timely meeting today with a very robust discussion. And I want to just thank everyone again for contributing to that and for the youth for showing up. And we look forward to seeing everyone at our next meeting in 2 weeks. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Recording stopped.
Thank you.